This morning's reading comes from Matthew, chapter 18, verses 21 through 33. Then Peter came and said to him, "Lord, if my brother or sisters sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times." This is the parable of the unforgiving servant. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, the Lord ordered him to be sold, together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." And out of pity for him, the Lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him by the throat, he said, "Pay what you owe." Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. Then his lord summoned him and said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?" Here ends the reading. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Marianne. And I need to start just by thanking Pastor Barbara for letting me do part 2 of this sermon series. It would have been like an itch that I had to scratch if I couldn't finish it. So thank you very, very much. And I also want to thank a lot of people who responded to part 1 of this sermon. Tom was kind enough to share that article that he had written. And it was wonderful because it just tied everything in. It tied the new members tea we're having. It tied it in with keeping Christmas through the year. So I appreciated that. I also had people who were sharing with me that they will keep some Christmas ornaments up all year long, just to remind them. And then Mike and Cindy Fergassi sent me this picture. This is a picture they keep up all year long. And so on the left, you can see the whole picture. On the right, you can just see it says, "Let Christmas live in your heart." And again, that's something they keep up all year long. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. This is a congregation that wants to keep Christmas all year long. So part 2, keep Christmas all year long. If you were here 2 weeks ago when we started, you know that I'm looking at this through the lens of Charles Dickens' beloved Christmas story, A Christmas Carol. The story of Ebenezer Scrooge, the miser who despised Christmas and has a change of heart. After being visited by 4 spirits on Christmas Eve, he has a change of heart. But just to remind you all where he started, at the very beginning, his nephew comes to his place of business to wish him a Merry Christmas, to which he memorably replies, "Bah, humbug." And then he invites him to Christmas dinner, and he refuses. And when the nephew is urging him to reconsider, this is his response: "Keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it?" repeated Scrooge's nephew, "but you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone then," said Scrooge. That's his attitude to Christmas. Let me leave it alone. So 2 weeks ago with part 1, We start out by looking at that first spirit that visited Ebenezer Scrooge. This is the ghost of Jacob Marley, his old partner. And that ghost is really there to say, as I am now, this is what waits for you if you don't change. All is not well with your soul. Your soul is in a pitiable condition. And we went on to talk about how that's really true of all of us. We looked at the first part of that parable that Marianne just read, the part where you have a servant who's in debt 10,000 talents to his Lord. And we said that that was an amount of money that would take a man 200,000 years to earn. In today's money, more than $10 trillion. It's an unimaginably large debt, which his Lord forgives out of mercy. And that's the relationship that we have with God. And that's the first part of keeping Christmas all year long, is recognizing how grateful we need to be, how much we owe God, how great his grace is. That's the first part. So today, looking at the second part, we are looking at the ghosts of Christmas. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The ghost of Christmas past shows him his past. And in particular, it shows him the people in his past who cared about him, who loved him. These are people that in many cases he had not seen or thought of for so long. So when he sees them again, he's filled with delight, but also regret. So first, the ghost shows him his childhood friends, the boys that he played with. And immediately he's delighted to see them again. But right on the heels of that comes some regret, because earlier that day, a boy that age had come around to sing a Christmas carol, and he had shouted at him to go away and slammed the door in his face. He feels regret now. The ghost shows him his older sister, Fan, who loved him, and he loved her. She had died young, but she had left a child, his nephew, Fred. He's delighted to see Fan again, and then there's the regret for how harshly he had pushed his nephew away. He sees Mr. Fezziwig. Fezziwig was the master to whom he was apprenticed. To be apprenticed is to spend time with this person, you've got a job, and you are learning a trade. And Mr. Fezziwig is a successful businessman, but he's also kind. Scrooge is reminded, you can be successful and be kind. And Mr. Fezziwig went out of his way to make work a pleasant experience. And on the heels of that, there's regret for how he treats his clerk, Bob Cratchit. He does not treat him well at all. And then, of course, the thing that really is a blow to his heart, he sees the woman that he loved, Belle. He says, I'd forgotten how beautiful she was. He had loved her. He had wooed her. They had become engaged. But then the ghost shows him another Christmas where she breaks off the engagement. She says, a golden idol has displaced me. I've seen all of your nobler goals be consumed by one master passion, the passion for profit. And he lets her go. And then the ghost shows him what he missed by that. He shows him Belle with a man that she did end up marrying, surrounded by the children they had together. And when she speaks of Ebenezer Scrooge, she speaks of him with pity. And this really breaks him. This is where he can't take any more. And this is what he says to the ghost of Christmas past. He says, Spirit, said Scrooge in a broken voice, remove me from this place. I told you that these were the shadows of things that have been, said the ghost, that they are what they are. Do not blame me. The next spirit that visits him is the ghost of Christmas present. And again, the ghost shows him people all over the world, rich and poor alike, coming together over Christmas, singing Christmas carols, toasting Christmas. And in particular, they spend time in two households. The first is the household of Bob Cratchit, his clerk. And Scrooge sees what a really fine man his clerk is. He's a good husband. He's a wonderful father. And he also sees that his clerk, his youngest son, Tiny Tim, is not strong. He is not healthy. Scrooge asks the ghost of Christmas present, he says, "Tell me, spirit, will the boy live?" And the ghost says, he will not see another Christmas unless something changes. And Scrooge says, "Oh, say he'll be spared." And that's when the ghost turns Scrooge's own words from earlier that day on him, terrible words that he had said. Some people had come around to collect some money to feed the poor, and Scrooge had actually said, if they're going to die, let them die and decrease the surplus population. And that's what the ghost says to him. Looks at Tiny Tim. If he's going to die, let him die. Decrease the surplus population. And Scrooge is absolutely stricken to the heart with that. And the ghost goes on to say, you should not speak of what you do not know. You don't know what the surplus population is or where it is. And it may be that in the sight of heaven, you, Ebenezer Scrooge, are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. This is a house where Scrooge could make a difference. But the Spirit does take him to another house, the house of his nephew Fred. And he sees the party that he was invited to. And there's music, there's dancing, there's joking and merriment, games, and it's been so long since Scrooge went to a party. He's loving it. He's tapping along with the music. And when they're doing the games, it's like me watching Jeopardy at home where I'm shouting the answers out at the screen. He's shouting the answers out even though nobody can hear him. He's loving it. This is a household that has something to offer him, if he would only say yes. And then, of course, there's the ghost of Christmas yet to come, the one that Scrooge fears the most, the one that does not speak, is very shadowy, but is showing him the shadows of what will be if nothing changes. And he sees in particular two deaths. He sees that Tiny Tim doesn't make it to another Christmas, and he sees that family mourning together, pulling together, united in their grief and their love, and saying, wherever we go, we will always remember Tiny Tim. And that contrasts with the other death, his own, where he is unmourned. The only emotion elicited is laughter. And at that point, he is just overwhelmed. He is begging this spirit, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, saying, spare me. Why show me these things if I'm past all hope? Tell me that I can change what I've seen here. And he makes this promise. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. So what are the lessons that they teach? I think there's only two. The first is how precious each day is. The past is something we can learn from, but we cannot change one word of it. And the future is still being formed. But today is the day that I can act. Today is precious. Don't lose a single moment. When Scrooge gets back, he wakes up and he's so happy to be in his house, in his bedchamber, in his bed. But it says, best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. And he doesn't waste a minute. He doesn't wait till the next day to start helping Bob Cratchit. No, he goes out, buys the biggest turkey he can find, has it sent to their household anonymously. He's walking through the streets saying Merry Christmas to everybody he sees. When he sees the people that had been trying to collect money for the poor, or that he'd said those terrible words to, he comes right up to them, begs their pardon, makes a donation, but says even more importantly, will you come and see me? Please come and see me. And they say, we will, we will. He goes to church for the first time in years, sings the carols as loud as he can, even though his voice is a little rusty. And of course, he goes to his nephew's house and he begs his pardon and asks, is it too late for me to accept your invitation? And he's welcomed in with open arms. Time is precious. Each day is precious. Every day. Don't waste a minute to do good. And the second lesson is that it's all about people. All the ghosts showed him people. People that had loved him. People that he could be helping. People that could help him. It's all about people. This brings us back to the parable. Last week, we had just looked at the first part of the parable, the story of the servant who was so far underwater in debt, needed mercy. But today, we're looking at the second part of it. But that same slave, the one that had been forgiven a 10,000 talent debt, as he went out, he came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. A denarii you could earn in a day. So you're looking at about maybe 3.5 months worth of work. It's not a small debt, but it is a doable one. Seizing him by the throat, he said, "Pay what you owe." Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." But he refused. And then he went and threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. Next slide, please. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their Lord all that had taken place. Then his Lord summoned him and said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?" God cares deeply about how we treat each other. That same mercy he shows to us, he wants us to extend it. He loves and cares for us. He wants us to love and care for each other. And that's the second part of keeping Christmas all through the year. Last Sunday was Epiphany Sunday. And there's a few definitions of the word epiphany. The first is a manifestation of Christ to the Gentiles as represented by the Magi. That's the story in the Bible of the wise men who come. So it can refer just to that one event that took place more than 2,000 years ago. Another definition is a festival commemorating the Epiphany on January 6th. So we say that last Sunday was Epiphany Sunday. And of course, the third definition is a moment of sudden revelation or insight, such as the one that Ebenezer Scrooge had. That, aha, this is important, this is going to change things. But I have to say, in looking at A Christmas Carol, I think there's another definition of epiphany. At the very beginning, when Jacob Marley's ghost is there with Scrooge and is talking with him, this is one of the things that he says. At this time of the rolling year, meaning Christmas time, at this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? And he asks this question, Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Epiphany, in this meaning, is something that can be relived. Every time we help somebody, epiphany is relived. Every time we accept help from somebody, epiphany is relived. Epiphany is the last story of the Christmas story in our Bible. Christmas is not complete without epiphany, without going out among our fellow men, giving help where we can, receiving help in our turn. That's the second part of keeping Christmas well. I was thinking about that more and more. I was thinking about how part one is all about my relationship to God, recognizing that I'm a sinner in need of saving, recognizing that I'm one of those people walking in darkness, as Isaiah said, living in the land of deep darkness, upon whom a light has shined. And the second part is all about how we respond. The Christmas story isn't over until we respond to that light. Like the wise men, being drawn by the light, guided by the light, bringing what gifts we have to lay in service of the King. Christmas isn't over until we are loving our fellow men. Sometimes when preparing a message, I'll get to the very end of it and suddenly realize, oh my heavens, I didn't even realize that that's where I was headed. But when I was looking at this, I realized, where have I heard this before? Relationship to God, relationship to each other. And I realized it was in Matthew 22, one of my favorite passages. Jesus is asked, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment." That's all about that relationship to God, understanding the magnitude of his grace. And then Jesus, without even being asked, adds this, "A second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." That's the second part of keeping Christmas well, keeping it through the year. It's in loving our fellow men, helping where we can, accepting help, just like the Holy Family accepted the gifts of the wise men. That's keeping Christmas well. When you have a writer of the stature of Charles Dickens, I decided to give him the final word in this message. The last 3 sentences of A Christmas Carol. It was always said of him, Ebenezer Scrooge, that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that be truly said of us and of all of us. And so as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Will you join me in prayer? God bless us, everyone. You do so richly bless us. The magnitude of your love, your mercy, it's beyond our ability to measure. And so we thank you for that. We come before you with grateful hearts. And Lord, you give us fellow men and women to be traveling this life with. Help us to be like those wise men, keeping our eyes fixed on you, going where you would send us, helping people that we can help, accepting help in our turn. Lord, we love you. We honor Christmas in our hearts, this day and every day. Amen.